you'll see the stories of like, oh, this painting sold for $1 bajillion, and then for 5 seconds everyone's like, oh, that's crazy, and then we all forget about it, but no one thinks about the implications.
This piece is aggressive, it's dangerous, it's stupid, and that's why I like it.
You know, because you're not worried about your grandma or your grandpa getting ripped off for a Jeff Koons. You're just not.
Another edition of Art Chat and Snack, Art Chat. Today, there are 3 babes here. I'm Corrie.
I'm Nat.
I'm Jen.
And what do we have for snacks today, Natalie?
Classic. We got some apple slices and salt and pepper pistachios, which are my obsession lately.
They're really good.
They're pretty addicting. We are talking about a documentary we just watched on Netflix called, what's it called? Blurred Lines Inside the Art World. And it's all about the art market, which if you have listened to us, if you're fans of the podcast, I think we throw our opinions about the art market out there fairly often. But this documentary was kind of illuminating and also kind of not surprising.
Yeah. We're
just going to talk about it and talk about some of the different ideas that were brought up during it. So where to begin?
With the financial collapse, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
September 15th, 2008.
They make a really interesting sort of juxtaposition in the very beginning, showing how, like, our financial market collapsed in 2008, and then meanwhile, something like 24 hours later, Damien Hirst has a record sale of, I think it was 111 million pounds.
It was, like, insane. And just the fact that he did that, like, the day after.
Yeah.
I almost feel like that was, like, his greatest artwork.
Right? Like, when that opportunity arose, he was probably just, like, in heaven.
And it's so interesting because they talk about how oblivious some people were at the auction to what was actually going on. Because, like, when the stock market collapsed, like, it took a while for us to understand what was actually happening, you know?
That was when he bypassed the dealers and just, like, that's important to note, too. So he didn't go with the traditional route of working through the dealers and through the auction house. He went straight to the auction house with 200 works and just sold directly, which was nuts for the time.
Yeah, that wasn't a thing you did. It's not a thing a lot of people do now.
Yeah, it's a little shady.
It's a no-no, if you will.
And Damien Hirst was like, I don't care. And he made crazy money.
He doesn't care.
Because he doesn't.
He genuinely does not.
He just does not care. So the documentary opens with Damien Hirst alongside the stock market crash. So, you know, very intense moment economically. And then it goes through a series. It kind of breaks it down into the different aspects of the art. Yeah, lots. There are 10 lots in the documentary, and it focuses on different aspects of the art market. So, like, artists, dealers, market, consultants. When I first saw the title of the documentary, I was like, that's kind of an interesting title. But I think the idea is, like, really trying to present how the understanding of the art market is this huge spectrum, and people are on, like, both sides of it.
And it kind of culminates at the end with people debating whether or not it should be regulated. And so that's where a lot of these differing opinions are rooted.
Yeah, and I think that the juxtaposition between the stock market collapse of 2008 and then how unbelievable prices have soared for contemporary art on the market. One of the people interviewed brings up a really good point, which was that there was a committee to try to introduce some kind of legislation for regulating the art market, and it didn't really get anywhere because they're kind of seeing it as it's like a rich person's playing field. There's no...
It's like a rich person's club, basically.
Right, and there's no poor people that are being, like, exploited. So in many ways, it's allowed to just go as far as it can go.
That's such an interesting argument. I don't even know if I'm, like, against it per se, but it's just, like...
Right.
It feels so...
So the argument is made, though, that because there's really no driving force to put regulation on the art market, you know, because you're not worried about your grandma or your grandpa getting ripped off for a Jeff Koons. You're just not. This, in many ways, is shaping our culture, hurting culture in a lot of ways, because the art world is becoming increasingly, I mean, it already is, but it's just getting more and more about what is going to sell for the highest amount.
Yeah.
And I think they made a good point to say that, you know, unless your grandparents are billionaires, they aren't going to get hurt by this, but the artists are getting hurt by this, and it's affecting artists' careers, essentially.
I think that's the main argument, and I know, like, the one I agree with is just this idea that it might not be affecting, you know, anyone but super rich people, but it is affecting art as a whole. It's affecting the art that's being created. It's affecting artists, and it's affecting anyone who wants to engage in art. Like, it's affecting us, you know, like the way the art market works. Like, it's something we have to think about, and we have to figure out a way to engage in, even though, like,
if you want to be involved in the art world.
Yeah, and that's, like, not our thing, you know, like, we're not rich, fancy people. So, like, so it becomes this complicated thing of, like, well, what is important about art? How do we want our culture to engage with art? And how do we want to support artists? And what artists do we want to support? Because, yeah, one of the biggest issues was that a lot of the artists that do incredibly well in the art market, like Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst, it's because they know how to play the game. And there's a difference between knowing how to play a game and making art, you know, and making good art. So there's, you know, this concern that there's a lot of good art out there that's never really making it to the forefront because they don't want to play the game or they don't know how to play the game.
And then on top of that game, like, that we recognize and we've all kind of accepted as okay, there's things coming out like Jeff Koons ripping someone off. Oh my gosh.
Oh, little caterpillar!
There is a little guy.
Come here.
On a laptop.
Do they bite?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Come here.
There's these weird
Can you see him?
caterpillars. No.
Oh, there he is.
Yes.
Yeah. Look at how weird
Look at
he is.
him.
Where's he going? Where did you come from? Where do you go?
Anyway,
Okay, back to Koons.
we're so
back.
easily amused.
Right?
Yeah, so Jeff Koons is being sued right now with Larry Gagosian for selling, I double-checked, it's $13 million worth of sculpture to someone over the course of a couple years. That was the price of 2 sculptures that he still has not made, and there's no evidence that he's even started working on them. So it's like there's a difference even now between playing the game in an acceptable and accepted fashion or Koonsing it.
Koonsing it up.
And ripping people off.
And making shitty art. And
making
everyone
shitty
loves
art
it.
and then not even making the shitty art that you promised you'd make.
Yeah, right? Like, just make the artwork, you know?
Yeah.
And then on top of it, we have issues, which I know we're going to do a future episode on this, where those artists, like Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons, are also workshop artists, where a lot of times they're not even physically making the work. They have entire workshops of artists, you know, doing the hard labor.
And again, I feel like Jeff Koons is taking this line that we're, like, kind of okay with, that is a little blurred, but he's just pushing it too far, because if you're thinking to, like, him not fulfilling these sculpture commissions, he has to pay a lot of people a lot of money, I'm sure, to get it built. So because he's doing that, that's why he can't pay back this man who he promised 2 sculptures, and why he probably also can't build the sculptures. Like,
Yeah.
it's a problem. I mean, I guess it's good. I guess we're seeing the holes with the system,
but not a lot of people see it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems with all this is because it's a rich man's game. What is it? Rich man's game of dice and small binoculars.
no one's really feeling bad for the guy who's out there $2 million.
And no one's paying attention.
Yeah.
Like, people in regular contemporary culture like us aren't paying attention because we can't even engage with it, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to pay my rent.
Exactly.
I don't care that rich people got ripped off
Exactly.
for 2 Jeff Koons.
Exactly. You'll see the stories of, like, oh, this painting sold for $1 bajillion, and then for 5 seconds everyone's like, oh that's crazy. And then we all forget about it, but no one thinks about the implications unless they are directly affected. So that means if you are a rich person or if you are an artist trying to make it in the art world. And so there's no pushback by contemporary culture.
Well, and there's also no drive to make it an accessible culture by the people that are operating within the art market. And you see this in the documentary when they're talking about Art Basel. And there's Art Basel, which is in Switzerland. And then there's Art Basel in Miami, which I really want to go to. That looks fun.
The art history babes want to go to Art Basel so bad.
Send us to Art Basel, Miami.
Please. We will make so much content. We will make so much content for you if you send us to Art Basel.
Oh, man.
Patreon.com/arthistorybabes.
We'll go.
We will go, and we will make all the content. So it'll be like you were at Art Basel.
Right.
Well, hey, there we go. That's a good pitch.
There you go. I'm a businesswoman now.
You know, so Art Basel Miami, it's definitely a different vibe than like Art Basel Switzerland.
Yeah.
Okay, like it's Miami, like
For obvious reasons.
Switzerland and Miami are very different places.
Yeah. And so, in a lot of ways, Art Basel started out as this kind of like a fair, and they talked about that the work that used to be exhibited at these events were just kind of the back room stuff that didn't get sold. But now, because it's gained so much popularity, they're actually having artists create work specifically for these fairs. And you are watching this documentary, and the people that are talking about it, these art collectors, dealers, art consultants, etc., what have you, they're kind of mad. They kind of don't like it. They're like, anyone can just go, and they don't even know anything about art. There is a prestige, and it's a class-driven world.
And it's interesting to me, like, that whole moment was very telling and very interesting to me because, one, some of the people that were responding that way were people who, throughout the documentary, I really liked. I liked their commentary, and I was like, this is a smart person. I think they're looking at this in, like, a bigger sense.
Yeah.
But then they would talk about Art Basel Miami as though, because, like, there is more partying, which is true. Like, all the best DJs and everyone goes to Art Basel Miami.
Jesus and Miro went.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, they're on the sand now. They're on the beach. All right, I mean, this is pretty interesting. They're using.
It looks like those, those R&B videos from the '90s when they're in the desert.
Yeah, this is a John Cicada video.
It's a pop culture kind of phenomenon now, and they were talking about it, kind of looking down on it.
Yeah,
it's like the high culture versus low culture type
I wonder
thing.
if they even realize they're doing it.
Yeah, right.
Some of them.
Not.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of young people that are. My meditation reminder. There are a lot of young people that are going down there and partying, but they're also going and looking at art.
Yeah.
And is that not a good thing?
And bringing money to an arts event and bringing
to help
popularity to an arts event.
The fact that it's bringing people and attention to visual art, like, isn't that a positive thing?
Yeah. Another thing about the film was these like random like film clips from movies, and it was just every problematic man.
Yeah. So they did these film clips like randomly as like to kind of try and make it more
sort
relatable,
of, like, funny.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're at an art gallery.
Yes. But like Jen pointed it out, she's like, why are all these clips of like problematic ass men?
It was Woody Allen first, and I was like, okay, I don't like him. And then Louis C.K., and I was like,
to be fair, people didn't know yet, but still. But
right.
people in the industry knew.
Right. And I was like, that's... and then, like, Mel Gibson, and I was like, but he's an anti-Semite. Like, why is he in this movie?
There are many more scenes of people in art galleries.
Yeah. There was a great clip of our girl Amy Poehler, though. That was from hilarious.
An Old Navy commercial.
Yeah.
This piece is aggressive, it's dangerous, it's stupid, and that's why I like it. This is entitled Blue Box. It's about the Civil War, obviously. This piece was made on a ship and then shipped to a car and then driven to a plane.
Highbrow, lowbrow, I mean, come on.
There was another really interesting thing that they brought up that I didn't know anything about. One of the issues and one of the things why the art market needs to be regulated is that people will inflate the prices of work by certain artists so that the work that they own is worth more. Meaning, if someone owns like a tiny little Andy Warhol, they might go to an auction and try and drive the price of Andy Warhol's up so that their Andy Warhol is worth more.
Yeah, they had a little part about how they talked about for Andy Warhol work specifically that like the collective group of people that own Andy Warhols will not let the value of any Andy Warhol dip below $1 million.
It's like a little Andy Warhol like owners club.
He would be so proud.
No, yeah, he would.
Honestly, yeah.
He really would.
And they also talked about how a lot of younger artists have been cannibalized by the art market in a similar way by inflating the value of their work too much before they have any ability to kind of like begin their career and start building the framework that they need for a long-lasting career.
Yeah.
It can be over before it even began, essentially, because of greedy people within the art market.
Yeah, and then there was an interesting debate about like flipping, like flipping artwork. So people buying artwork for investment and then flipping it to make money, which is, you know, people flip houses all the time, right?
Yeah.
And we don't think anything of it.
Yeah.
It's just like, cool. But when it comes to art, people are like, no. It's shameful to flip art, though, which is interesting to me because, like, I get it, but I'm also like, I have so many criticisms of the art market, and I don't like the way it works. But I also believe if you pay for something, it is yours. You can do whatever the hell you want with it.
Also, that's it's like totally just like, who do they think we are? Like, we're that naive that we don't realize that rich people are buying artwork as an investment that they're then going to capitalize on.
It's another one of those examples where they're making a rule and they're drawing a line in the sand, and it sounds like they're being moral about it, but the underlying intention is not at all. It's really just to keep people out and keep people out of the game. Because if flipping becomes more regular, then people could do it with, you know, cheaper art. And it would actually create a real market that all people could participate in,
and
or
I think
more people.
I think it plays into that idea of the artistic genius, which is a very highbrow modern idea, because we're saying this piece of artwork is just like, it's like so important that it must be respected within these lines, and even if you pay millions of dollars for it, you don't get to decide what happens to it. And it's like, if you pay for it though, it's yours. Like, that's it's now your property. You get to do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
You know?
You can erase it.
Yeah. Right?
Honestly,
right?
if I could afford one, like, I'd even buy a Gauguin and flip that shit and make
Into
some
a
money.
fire?
Like, straight into a fire.
Like, I would.
So basically, there are so many people, like different roles in the art market that are at play here. And so many different people that I think are affected differently. You know, the artist is affected different from the gallerist, is affected different from the consultant, is affected different from the auction house. And it really is like this complicated thing, and something that is worthy of being super critical of. Because even the people inside it recognize that regulation is needed, that there are problems, and that it might be having a really negative effect on art and the art world right now.
They kind of end it nicely with talking about how art has been going up in value and prices have been getting higher and it's inflating, and people act like it's going to continue that way forever, and it can't, it won't. And so there was someone who had a great line about, is it going to deflate slowly or is it going to burst?
How would it burst? Like, that's because doesn't a bubble burst when there's been too much inflation on something and it can't keep up with the demand, right? So
that's what they're saying. It's going to get to that point where it's just the inflation is too high that it's not going to keep.
I suppose, but I also just feel like there's no limit to the insanity of, like, rich people on the planet right now.
There literally has to be a limit.
Right.
Is the thing. Like, the economy, like, the art market doesn't...
Money isn't infinite. At least not... I mean...
Maybe if Bitcoin takes off, like, maybe that'll change everything.
Oh my god.
Like, cybercurrency could be the game changer in all this.
And also, art has always been something, you know, that the wealthy have enjoyed, but the documentary made it very clear that this level of, like, wealth and money going into the art world is entirely new. Like, this has happened in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, since the 80s, so past 30 years.
It hasn't even been that long since artists have been working autonomously without a patron, which they kind of cover at the beginning. Like, this is even newish.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but it could fizzle out, or it could explode.
And, you know, that brings up a good point, is that if there is some kind of bubble bursting situation that seems to be nigh, I think that the push to regulate will be a lot more intense because people are making their living off of doing this, out of selling art, and a lot of people would be hurt by it, like, bursting. So I think we're going to see it. So that might be interesting.
Well, I think generationally it's going to be an interesting thing because, millennials were still pretty young, but we're going to get to the point where we're, the mainstays of the economy, and like we're getting there. We're going to be there soon,
Yeah, and we can't afford anything.
Exactly. When you look at millennial culture, we look for things that are handmade that you can buy at the farmer's market. Like I have plenty of, art in my house that our friends have made, or things I've bought online at like Etsy, and I love it with my whole heart.
I could have a grad school show.
Yeah, right?
Right now. I could go set it up while we speak.
So like I think millennials we're just buying art straight from artists that are trying to make a living because that just makes way more sense. And so I definitely think in the next 20 years, when we're more of the stronghold in the economy, we're going to be a lot less... Yeah,
up with us
exactly. We're going to be a lot less into this idea of inflating art for the sake of investment. It just doesn't, I don't think it makes sense with our ethos.
And it is an ethical issue.
It's an ethical issue. I would love to be to a point in my life where I had enough money to where I could buy like a really nice piece of art that maybe had some history to it. That would be great. But like this spending $60 million on... a Basquiat. No, like I will never do that. Yeah. I will never do that. Like that does not make any sense to me. As someone who adores Basquiat, that does not make any sense to me.
Yeah, if I had that money to spend on that, I would not spend it on that.
I know.
I'd just be like, no, that's ridiculous.
Like I would love to spend my money on art, but that's ridiculous. That's
unreal.
Yeah. The one other thing that I liked at the end was mention of like how history weeds people out and how that's going to be interesting. And I was just thinking about it when you're talking about Basquiat because like I don't think history is ever going to weed him out, but like all of his work can't be worth that much forever. Mm-hmm. Like in 20 years, it might be affordable to get like a lesser known. Who knows? Like maybe
that'd be great. That'd be super cool.
Like that stuff could potentially happen, or I'd be happy if it did, not because I want the value of that to drop. I just want the value of other things to rise, so it just spreads.
Yeah, I want the value.
Spread it out.
I want the value of art to be in a place where everyone can enjoy it.
Yes.
Like a reasonable place to where we can have it and enjoy it and support artists, and it can be this beautiful utopia.
Yeah, we want socialist art. I like it starts off with the quote by Jerry Saltz, who we love. Art is for anyone, it just isn't for everyone. And I was like, no, that's not right.
No. We want art to be for everyone, because I do think art is such a big thing that no matter who you are, you can find something about it that you enjoy. And that's kind of, I think, the central message of what we do. So I understand it's the art history babes versus billionaires right now, but... is what it is, I guess.
Whatever.
Crazier battles have been won.
So, the art market, it's a complicated thing.
We don't understand it.
We're working on it.
I understand it, like, this much more.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the documentary is very insightful and I think really gives a good idea of what's going on, but it also does a really nice job of kind of shining light on the fact that a lot of people don't know what's going on.
Right.
A lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, definitely.
Give it a thumbs up.
Thumbs up. So if you want to join in on the art market conversation, make sure you leave a comment down below for us. We will respond to as many as we can. Give us likes and subscribes and all that. Yeah. Subscribe to the channel. And check out the podcast if you haven't. That'll all be linked down below as well. We talk about the art market like in and out of episodes all the time. So this conversation will continue, I'm sure. Thanks so much for watching our YouTube video.
Bye, guys.
Bye.